and Mid East are holding competitions, offering generous professional development prizes. Please visit their booths in the Martial Arts Building to find out more. The other thing is that directly after the plenary session, we just want to remind you that we have one of our special events at 3 o'clock, the poster session. And this poster session will happen in SSE CP19. And of course, you can look in your program book to find the details there. And finally, to remind you about tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we will begin promptly, I hope, with our third plenary speaker, Dr. Leslie Beckman. Okay? So, I think those are all the announcements. On to the introduction. It is really my great honor and privilege to introduce to you our plenary speaker, Dr. Ola Hafiz. Dr. Hafiz is a linguist, a teacher, and a teacher trainer. She has been educated at Cairo University, Lancaster University, and the University of California in Los Angeles. Dr. Hafiz has held teaching positions at both Cairo University and the American University of Cairo, where she's taught teaching methods, discourse analysis, second language acquisition, and contrastive linguistics, as well as academic writing, EFL, and ESP. She was also involved in revamping the EFL curricula and teacher training at the American University of Cairo. She was one of the founding board members of NileTESOL and was president of the affiliate for the years 2010 through 2011. She's written many articles on discourse analysis, language teaching and learning, and has refereed research and grant proposals for a number of grant donor organizations and journals. She has given dozens of presentations and workshops at local, regional, and international conferences on various areas of ELT. I am sure you can agree that we are very fortunate to have such an experienced professional and dynamic speaker with us here today. Dr. Hafiz's speech is entitled, "Before Testing, Teach Me How to Read," which will address how we can help to train our students in practical ways to become better critical readers. I am sure we are all looking forward to hearing the many valuable insights she has to share on this important and challenging topic. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ola Hafiz.
Thank you, Mariah, for the very kind words. Right, I'd like to start by thanking the NileTESOL and the organizing committee for inviting me to be here. It's really a pleasure to talk to such a large audience. I didn't expect so many, mashallah. And also to be part of the NileTESOL great event. I'm glad I've seen it in the early stages, and I'm glad it's growing and growing and becoming this wonderful event. We've all listened to the plenary session in the morning, and it was very insightful. And I'm sure the sessions you attended were as attractive as the ones that I attended, very lively and very full of ideas. Thank you for putting up and holding on to continue with the day. I know it's 2 o'clock and you probably had many ideas. So in this session, I'd like to speak with my experience, not only as a linguist and as a language teacher, but I got so many insights of one experience in particular that I had a few years ago, and that was my involvement in the preparation of the high school nationwide exam, ثانوية عامة. And the way the exam is prepared, and I was the leader of the team, but the team insisted on some things that were like taboos. There were certain things that everybody has to abide by, and these are the traditions in our school system. And through that experience, I got to know about an area that I wasn't very familiar with, school teaching, and school teaching of reading in particular. And it was there that I got to see and confirm my assumptions about how our students, the ones who enter university, what kind of expectations they have when they read, and what kind of preparation they have when they read. Most of the time they said that the preparation they got was mainly by being given passages and being asked how to answer the questions. And how did you go about it? And they said, well, we scanned for something similar and we wrote the answer. So I wasn't really sure that that was exactly what I had in mind about reading. It didn't match what the research on teaching reading and on reading as a cognitive skill means. So it is from this background, as well as my teacher training background, that I come to speak today. Let's start by looking at what some of our learners, our poor reading learners, do. Some of the strategies they follow are the focus on the content rather than how to read. By being asked to read, they think they have to understand every word. And some teachers, definitely not you, you're more into teacher training and professional development, but the ill-prepared teachers that taught them were only interested in explaining every word, making sure that the students understood every single word and what the content of the passage was, rather than developing the skill of reading and the different skills and sub-skills of reading. They were not interested in that. All they were interested in was, do they understand the passage? Do they understand all the information? Scanning for answers, looking for the answer that confirmed or matched the question, and then they would copy that. Sometimes they would copy relevant and irrelevant parts as well, because they seem to match the same words. They would look at details and be very interested in those details, and not necessarily details that were relevant, but they wanted to understand every single word. And not tolerate ambiguity, not tolerate anything they didn't understand. They thought they had to use the same words in order to show that they understood. They thought they had to use the same sentence structure in their answers in order to show that they understand. And the reading exercise became one of an achievement test. A test where they are expected to use the same words that they studied before. And if for any reason, God forbid, one of the words that came in the reading passage in Sanawiyya Amma that they hadn't encountered in their syllabus, then the minister or the counselor of English would apologize and say, well, that word was mentioned in the textbook. It was on page so and so. And that would mean that, don't worry, it's all seen. Either the passage is seen or the words are seen. Is this reading? Are we really teaching them how to read here? We're only testing them in their proficiency, but we're not really teaching them or testing them on how well they can think of reading as a guessing game, as someone defined it. As a result of such training and such tests, such poor readers are not really prepared for the tasks that they have to meet in everyday life. The tasks of the 21st century, the tasks of being critical readers who would read, trying to figure out what this means and what it implies, and figure out things that they hadn't encountered before. So this kind of reading doesn't really help them. So how do we help them? This is what the intention of this session is. I'm sure you read the abstract, and the intention of this session is to see how to prepare such readers, such learners, in order to learn better. Now, before we start, I'd like to ask you a few questions. Can you think and reflect on what you've read Yesterday, what you read yesterday? Can you think of what you read? What did you read? Emails? Newspapers? Facebook? All right. How long did you spend on reading that? An hour? 5 minutes? Every now and then, not one session? Why did you read it? What purpose did you have in mind? Did anybody impose it on you and tell you you have to read this, or was it your own choice? Did you decide at some point, enough, I don't want to continue reading this? And that was your decision. And nobody forced you to go on and you have to read it because it is your duty to read it. Did you have any problems understanding the structure, the background, the words? Did you meet any problems whatsoever? How did you sort them out? Look them up in the dictionary? Online? Guessed? Or decided? It doesn't matter. It's not important. You ignored them and you went on. These are all options that are available to us in everyday life. However, when it comes to teaching, we don't allow our students to make such decisions. Did you use the dictionary? Online, you said? Maybe somebody used the dictionary, maybe not. You decided not to. Tolerated the difficulties? Did you read them all at the same speed, the different things that you read? Or did it vary from one thing to another? And the same depth? Did you decide you have to understand every single word, or some things had to be read thoroughly while others? Did you read the program, the TV program in detail? Okay. And the same amount of attention to all the parts of the text? Definitely not. So the variety in voices of the morning plenary comes very handy here, because these vary from one purpose to another, from one task to another. Now I'd like you to look at this, and see. Can you read this? Okay, can we read it together? This message serves to prove all right, you made your point, I'm convinced. Actually, you made my point. What's the point here? The point is, despite the assumption that we have to understand every single word, that if there's a typo we cannot understand, look at this. It's not written in English letters, and the letters look funny sometimes. Sometimes they are not letters, and we still understand it. How do we manage to understand it? What is it that comes to work so that we understand it? Do we decode, do we decipher every single word, every single letter? No. What is it we rely on? We rely on the context. And depending on the context, this message, what could this be other than message? So we can read some parts and we can guess the rest depending on that, depending on the context. And the context here is many things. The context is that this is written and it comes as a clip sent by social media. That this, another context, is the language context in the beginning. So you look at the words before and after and you decide this should be a noun, this should be a verb, this should be a preposition. So we look at the context and decide accordingly. Now let's read this one. All right. So what animal are we talking about here? And what's the place? Where is it? All right. And is it, what action is happening there? All right. Did you notice anything funny? Did you notice that the word to appeared twice? Did you notice that the word monkey is misspelled? Did you all notice that? Anybody who didn't notice? Can you raise your hand if you didn't notice? It doesn't make you a bad reader. On the contrary, you can make sense of things despite the imperfection, which shows that you're not reading. When we read, we don't read every letter, we don't read every word. Our eyes jump from one part to another in order to make sense of units. So while we're doing that, I didn't notice that the word to, except because I typed it myself, but I wouldn't have noticed that the word to occurred twice. And monkeys is monk-keys, which is not really the correct spelling. But because you're a fast reader, you're an effective reader in English, you manage to read that without noticing those details, because we don't read word for word and letter for letter. And this is a good sign of being a good reader in the language. Now, I'd like to conclude this part of the session by looking at what our students do in the class and what we do in real life. In terms of language, what we do in real life is tolerate and guess. So there's no reason why students should insist on full understanding of every single word in order to understand. In terms of the content, in real life, we look at the meaning in context and look at our background knowledge in order to guess, unlike texts that may be imposed on students and removed from their experience, so they are not related to them. In terms of speed, some students have one pace, which is word after word, after word, after word, after word, without jumping from one unit to another in order to get the meaning rather than the details. The choice, as you said, it was personal. You selected what you wanted to read, and you selected how long to read that. While with students, usually there are set books, there are imposed things, or sets to choose from, but they are not really given the choice to choose those. Questions to think about. In terms of attention, we skip irrelevant parts because they are simply irrelevant. Students are not given this choice, or they think, they have the assumption that to be a good reader, to be a good student, you have to read everything. And we discussed the vocabulary and the purpose and the strategies. We skim, scan, read extensively long text, while they think everything has to be understood fully from beginning to end when it comes to the classroom. Now, are we preparing them for real life reading or just for tests? Sometimes English to beginners looks exactly like this. It looks like gibberish. I don't want to insult any particular language and say it looks like this language to me, because that language makes sense to its population. But sometimes this is what English looks like to our students, or at least parts of it. How much do you understand out of this? No. But I promise you, like many of our students who don't understand, I'll give you a test. And I want to see how many of you will get the full mark. Those who get the full mark will be given places in the Faculty of Medicine. If you don't get the full mark, well, too bad. Maybe you'll go to the Faculty of Arts English department. All right, let's look at the first question. Number 2. And finally, Agile. So what's your score? So many doctors in this room, so many future doctors. All right. Now what does this show? What does this show? That sometimes the reading exercises, the way we test our students, doesn't necessarily show how well they understand. You all admitted that you didn't understand, yet you all got the full mark and you're going to operate on us. Are you prepared for that? Is this really the way to test? What's wrong with this type of exercise? Based on form, it's lifted from the passage, the same words as the passage, and we can guess because of the word form, but not necessarily the meaning. What's this flag? So it seems that the way we test reading doesn't, or we train our students doesn't necessarily prepare them for reading comprehension. By comprehension, we mean understanding, not just answering exercises and getting the full mark, although our students may differ. And they say, well, I'm only interested in passing the test and getting the full mark. Let's look at a passage like this one. As you notice, we're not reading aloud because I want you to go at your own pace. Done? Okay. What's the problem described here? The patient is upset. Is this the problem? That he's upset? What's the problem? That I didn't manage to talk to the patient who seems to be upset about something that I don't know. Okay. Or could it